All right, thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the award-winning Sales Game Changers podcast. My name is Fred Diamond with the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. I'm very excited for today's show. We do a lot of shows, Jillian and Alex, on AI and the selling process, but we're going to get very specific in what SentinelOne and the public sector is doing with AI tools, how they're using them. And we're going to get a great perspective on that. I want to remind people you could read the transcription and listen to today's show at salesgamechangerspodcast.com, salesgamechangerspodcast.com for the complete transcription and audio of over 850 shows. And if you type in Jillian Swenson's name, you'll see her on occasion. She's been on the show before, and I'm very excited to be talking to you in today's role. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review. All right, I'm very excited. We got Jillian Swenson, Alex Cruz with SentinelOne. Jillian and Alex, just give us a brief introduction, what you do with SentinelOne. And I'm excited that we're going to get very deep into how you and your sales organization are using AI tools to be more effective. Jillian, why don't you get us started?
Thanks. It's great to be back here again, Fred. I appreciate the time. So I'm Jillian Swenson, and I have recently joined SentinelOne as the Vice President of Federal. And as Fred mentioned, when I did this show before, the closing question for me was, what's your best advice to sales leaders? And I said, if you're not using AI, you've got to embrace it. So when Fred reached out about me doing the show again, I'm like, well, let's go deep on AI and talk about that. So I'm excited to talk to you today, Fred.
That was a great bit of advice. That was close to 2 years ago. We're doing today's
Yeah.
interview in July. Yeah, and that's you were ahead of your curve. Good for you. And we're doing today's interview in July of 2026. So it's a different world as it relates to AI, and we're going to get deep into how you're directing your selling professionals. Alex Cruz, give us an introduction.
Thank you and welcome. I appreciate the time on this podcast. Definitely checking it out. Definitely a subscriber of it. Alex Cruz, been with the company for 5+ years. I'm the Senior Global Director of Field Enablement at SentinelOne. So that means onboarding, field enablement, obviously everything on productivity. So AI is close to our heart and making sure that the field has what they need to be successful.
Well, I'm glad to have you on the show because we've done a lot of shows. Obviously, we've done over 850 sales game changer shows, and we actually have a special sub brand called AI in Sales Brief, where we get into the ties with AI in sales. And a lot of it's evolved a lot since we've been doing this over the last year. The podcast has been around for 9 years, but AI topics, and Jillian was one of the first people to get it started. So, Alex, why don't you get us started here? Every sales leader, of course, is talking about AI, thinking about AI. However, many have struggled on how to standardize and manage across the sales process and with the sales organizations. What made SentinelOne decide this wasn't something to watch, but something that your sales organization needed to embrace and kind of get us started in the conversation here?
Yeah, and honestly, I will say this is something that when Julian came on board, she said exactly that. She is just firsthand all AI. How can I use it to be a better leader? But also, how can I really unlock productivity within the sales org? For us specifically at enablement, it's all about how can we really enable the teams on the right workflows? What are the repetitive tasks that you're just drowning day in, day out that AI can automate? It honestly goes to our DNA as a company. If you look at SentinelOne's history, way back when we were founded 13+ years ago, Tomer Weingarten really looked at all these threats coming in, and we were a signature-based antivirus. How can I use AI and ML to stop attacks at machine speed? And so when we're thinking that and flipping that on the sales productivity side, how can I look at a salesperson's day and see what's taking so much time? There's just so many areas of account research, proposal building, RFIs, RFPs that are just drowning a sales and even account team. When you think about a sales engineer and all the other folks that are involved in that process that are just eating up time. So for us, it's how do we really provide the tools necessary that an account team has to automate a lot of those tasks and get some more time back in their day.
So we're going to be talking about the tools in a second here. I'm going to ask you to kind of take us through some of the tools, and I'm excited. A follow-up question, Jillian, I'm going to have for you is, you know, we talk a lot now about workflow, right? And how AI needs to complement the selling professional's workflow. And I'm excited to ask you that question. But first, Alex, kind of give us a little bit of an orientation. You mentioned several different AI platforms. Walk us through some of the different tools your team uses, and more importantly, why would someone use Gemini versus Claude versus maybe a tool like Actively?
Mhm.
Which job I'm sure you've gotten deep into them, obviously, in the sales process. Which job performs best at the various levels?
Yeah, and this is honestly one of the very first questions we got when we were starting to go heavy on productivity for AI. There's so many different tools, and a lot of times there's overlap. So we are a Google shop. So I think definitely on Gemini, NotebookLM is an amazing tool which can do
Hmm.
amazing things for account planning and really just building together really good notebooks for all of your accounts. We recently got Claude this year, and so that is still a learning journey. I won't say that we are experts in it, but we're making a lot of great strides in it. And then as we're thinking about really the agentic form, because a lot of the enablement that we've had was more of, okay, using these tools to be more efficient. But how can we leverage a tool that is going to go out and be an agent working for you 24/7, where it's looking at signals, buying signals, looking at a recent podcast like this and saying, hey, there is an account that is matching the ICP and matching these buying signals that you should engage and reach out. So this is where we're really taking it to the next level of leveraging AI to be more proactive and more engaged in those early sales cycles.
I love that because there's so many tools, and what a lot of people get wrong, we think, is that they focus on the tool, right? As like, let's just get, especially in enablement, there's thousands of tools at this point, if not tens of thousands. You know, you could spend all the time working on tools, and it's really about the workflow. So, Jillian, good to have you again on the podcast. Thank you so much. Why don't you walk us through the typical day, typical sales day with AI? Where does AI show up for the first customer interaction until the opportunity closes?
Well, we're actually seeing a big shift there. So even just, 5, 6 months ago when I joined, got with Alex's team, started looking at it, and my team had not embraced AI much. And I was a power user, really experienced on Claude. So my first thought was, well, how do we start doing that basic research? And that is where we started. And then we started to get more focused on what Alex touched on, which is how do you take the work out of like routine activities? So if you're putting together a presentation, you can leverage Gemini to create your Google PowerPoint, for example. Or if you're putting together a communication, what does that look like? And then I had my team doing things like their account planning using a tool that Alex's team built that's like, our account plan is going to look like this, going to leverage everything underneath. So we started doing more of that prep and research. But now with the implementation of Actively, we're starting to switch into the more proactive, strategic focus on a daily basis. And my team is just getting up to speed on that. It's a new implementation for us. So we'll have to do this again in a year because I'm sure it's going to have completely changed at that point. But it really is about starting to just look at your workflow and figure out where it is not a high value, high experience task and shift that work over to an AI tool.
So most people probably know about Gemini and Claude and ChatGPT, of course. Could you tell us a little more specifically about Actively, either one of you, about what actually it does, how it's used? To be frank with you, it's not a tool that I'm particularly familiar with.
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. So actively is it's really an agent, right? That's trained on the vast majority of our systems internally, and that's also hooked into LinkedIn, into Zoom Info, into Demand Base, which is our buyer intent tool. And so what it'll do is crawl the internet, right? It crawls basically all of the signals on LinkedIn, and then basically compares it against all of our internal systems that will essentially slack a rep, an SDR, an account team as soon as there's intent, as soon as it identifies there's some signals going on with this account that marks an engagement. And that's not just a signal of, hey, go reach out. It provides buyer from LinkedIn. It also will provide a customized email. So it's basically doing a lot of this guesswork of, okay, which accounts do I need to really start engaging with? And I think this is the one thing that, gets me most excited about AI. It's like when you have this account base and you were hunting, and we all were there before when we didn't have AI, and you were looking for something, you were looking for some diamonds in the rough. A tool like Actively will literally eliminate a lot of that, just that time space of here's someone in the market that right now is searching for security tools that is a problem that we can solve. So that at a high level, it does a lot more, but that's really the intent behind it. A 24/7 agent that's working for you to find those ripe accounts.
Very good. Jillian, I'm going to ask you in a second about some of the biggest promises with AI and what some of the things are that you're seeing from an improvement perspective. I'm going to ask you a very basic question. Alex, you just mentioned LinkedIn. Maybe Jillian, you can chime in. How are you, again, most basic tool that there is right now, probably one of the biggest tools in B2B and B2G, et cetera. How are you instructing your sales organizations to use LinkedIn? Very basic question, very basic tool, but I'm kind of curious. We're getting deep into the AI. What's your advice and strategy for them on using LinkedIn? Whoever wants to take that first. Jillian, why don't you go first?
You start, Alex, and I'll close us out.
LinkedIn for us, it's critical. We have LinkedIn Navigator, and that's something that we use to really understand where the contacts are. Again, just understanding their profile, matching up honestly with us, understanding who we have relationships within SentinelOne that could actually broker a meeting. That's something that we use very heavily here within SentinelOne. And then just understanding that profile of, do we have really good buying intent also with openings of job boards? AI security is top of mind. So if they're actually going and hiring a lot of AI data scientists, a lot of web developers, AI right now, we're looking for those job roles on LinkedIn, which are mostly posted, and using that as buyer signals. And Jillian, go ahead and share more.
Yeah, so we're doing all the typical things, social amplification, driving people to our events that you've historically seen. But where I've personally used it and seen my team using it more recently is having that outreach very customized. So having the research done across their public profiles, not just LinkedIn, but where they've spoken publicly, articles someone might have published, and really getting a sense of what that person is trying to drive at their organization before you do the outreach. So doing the background research and then actually customizing it. So I was sharing with Alex recently, I was doing a cold outreach to 3 different C-levels at the same company. And I wanted to make sure that the messaging was consistent, but was completely customized to their particular role. So, having Claude just rapidly do that, it would have taken me, I don't know, maybe 2 hours to craft a great response. And I was able to take that, do it pretty quickly. But the only thing I changed was the first responses didn't sound like me. They were flowery, they were long. I'm like, oh no, that's not me. Let's just get to the point, make the ask, use the data, and go. So I was able to work with Claude and send it some of my previously written emails so they could have more of my voice and tone. I think that's important. We talked a lot about AI slop and not wanting, I get stuff in LinkedIn every day. It's just delete, delete, delete because it's just spam at this point. And I don't want to show up that way to our customers.
That's great. So, Jillian, let's get back to some of the biggest promises of AI. And of course, one of them is speed, and hopefully speed being more productive. What are you seeing as some of the biggest gains with your sales organization? You mentioned prospect research, account planning, writing emails, writing LinkedIn requests. You just talked about
Yes.
collaboration amongst groups. Are your sales reps getting faster? Are you seeing improvements from them by better utilization of all the tools we're talking about?
1,000%, 1,000%. So just looking at typical sales cycles, like how to do annual planning, how to prep for, account reviews with a customer, they're leveraging the tools and it's making it better, more effective. And what I will say, particularly with Claude, is that as you move up the maturity level in working with AI and you stop using it just as like a super Google and you really start refining things and having it as a conversation with Claude, you get a much, much higher quality product out of it. And I've had results come back initially that aren't quite right. And my experience allows me to say, oh, that's not quite right. Let's tweak it a little bit. And we found that if you are working iteratively with Claude in particular, that it gets very good at actually recommending approaches to take. It will often give you 3 options based on the research that you provided it and things like that and help you really hone your messaging.
That's amazing. Alex, so again, we're talking with Jillian Swenson and Alex Cruz with SentinelOne. We're talking about usage of AI. So of course, AI, Alex, becomes more powerful when it's connected. And you've already begun to talk about some of the ways that it gets connected here to various other applications. But talk about how you're integrating AI with platforms such as Salesforce and maybe HighSpot. How does that change the seller experience? Because everything we're talking about here is designed to make your sellers more effective. And again, I run the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. And the reason in May of 2025, we changed our name from Institute for Excellence in Sales to the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. Because Jillian, we talked to 200 people like you, senior sales leaders, who said coming out of the pandemic, our people just need to be more effective at 30 different things. So, Alex, and by the way, Alex, I'm getting from you that you really enjoy this, that
That's
you really enjoy
You got to be
creating these
passionate about it.
solutions.
Yes, exactly. I do. I love what I do, and I mean, as any good enabler, I definitely held a bag for many years, had a passion for mentoring, and here I am. So that's what I love, and seeing other people really get successful is something that I crave. For the integration piece, and I think this is what's critical, and it might parlay into another question you have, or just around like areas of that we've seen as concerns or issues that we're seeing across the Salesforce. But it's critical that we connect into Salesforce, just making sure that all the data is hooked in there. If you want to query your account base, if you want to query an account, the next steps to win have to be we're really diligent on having that deal and the opportunity at the next step level. So getting into those areas, high spot for us is our source of truth when it comes to content, when it comes to sales plays. And so leveraging that content when we're querying Claude and making sure that there's guardrails in place. And this is something that we see as, I mean, AI is amazing and you can definitely spend just inordinate amount of times building great content. But if you don't have guardrails that are really making sure that we're staying on brand, that we've got really our key value messaging, then it's going to have a tendency to hallucinate. There's no way that you can just, eliminate hallucinations unless you put some guardrails in place. Another example is really big on value, quantifying value, right? So we're solving a lot of big pain points, a lot of time back into these security teams. If we just trust AI without any checks and balances, who's to know that that calculation is right? So we do have a business value assessment tool, which we're now working on integrating within all of our AI stack. So that when you say, hey, I want to create a value assessment, a cost ROI analysis, it actually is using guardrails to eliminate a lot of the kind of, hopeful calculations and content that's built without some guardrails. So that's a little bit of a things that we're dealing with now, which I think, the folks on the call would appreciate.
I want to follow up on the guardrails. So how do you encourage, I don't know, experimentation while making sure that customer data, messaging, compliance, and quality stay protected? And I think also, I know that SentinelOne has a tool related to that. Would you mind kind of addressing that now, the whole
Yeah, for
concept of
sure.
guardrails?
For sure. So the guardrail piece, and this is something that when we rolled out Claude, we saw just a lot of amazing innovation where specifically the SEs, the engineers were like first at bat of creating these amazing skills and just these things that other people could use. So what we did is very quickly establish an SE innovation center to just go and make sure and see, okay, is this something that we can leverage internally? Is it customer facing? It needs definitely a lot more checks and balances and governance. So we have a good process of organically trying to surface up some really good talent and just skills that an SE may be using in Vancouver that could be something that could be applied globally. So that's something that we've had really good success in. Also, as a company for engineering and support, we also have an area of review for skills and then making those publicly available. Speaking about the human piece that Jillian was saying, we've all seen those AI generated emails. We actually have a humanizer skill that will go in and crawl your emails and look to see your voice of tone, your inflection. How are you speaking on Zoom? And making sure that your AI generated communications out to the customer are in a human nature and they're not AI with all the hyphens everywhere, right? But going back to essentially the solution, I think this is something that's really one of the fastest growing lines within SentinelOne is prompt security. So shadow AI is rampant everywhere. Before we had a lot of these guardrails in place, you can imagine employees just want to leverage AI. So they'll go on to their own personal instance of ChatGPT, of Gemini, of Perplexity, and start loading up, possibly some sensitive data like account information. You want to build an account deck, but you're using your personal information, or actually account information on these personal websites. And so this is a severe risk, which obviously is a lot of companies are grappling with. We have one of the best solutions here that can not eliminate the use of shadow AI, but enable safe use of it. And this is imperative that companies shouldn't stifle innovation, but you have to have some guardrails in place. So if there's sensitive information, we can either redact it, stop it, and then actually give a bit of information back to that employee of this is why we can't have you loading this instance of information, and then also making sure that we're staying within separate governance and guardrails. For obviously, data compliance is massive as well. When you think of the
Yeah,
Act, yeah.
exactly. Alex, I have one more question for you. Jillian, I'm sorry if you feel left out in the last couple of questions here, but
No, that's
one
fine.
of one of the things we've talked about is as social media got big was how do your people represent the company on places like we alluded to LinkedIn and Facebook and other Instagram or other type of social media, and that may or may not have been a huge challenge. But you also mentioned, Alex, developing SentinelOne specific AI skills. So what does that mean? And, again, your employees represent SentinelOne, right?
Right.
Yes, they're human beings. Yes, they have hobbies, hopefully, and maybe kids in Little League and maybe political views and, whatever it is that they want to get out there. But they're representing SentinelOne, in the work environment. It's gotten a little bit blurry. So how do you make sure that their usage of the AI, reflects SentinelOne messaging, positioning, competitive differentiation, um, and best practices?
Yeah.
Tell me if that's a big challenge and how do you do that?
So internally, for sure, like hooking into Highspot number one enables us to make sure they're on brand. And these are things when they're developing custom content, we want them to tailor content. You don't want boilerplate decks going over and just, assuming these are the challenges you're dealing with. We want them to customize and tailor the content, but we also want the main narrative to be involved there. Going back to social media, we have a really good social and brand team, which
Hmm.
literally will build out LinkedIn posts on key announcements, on key thought leadership pieces. So ensuring that they've got a good baseline, we encourage a little bit of flexibility. And to Jillian's point, we want to make sure that it's supporting her federal DoD and Civ teams. But at the minimum, as a company, we should be supplying that overarching narrative, that key areas of differentiation, and then from there we'll tailor it. But yes, that's the key thing of hooking into a lot of our systems and also working closely with our social and brand team, so that sales teams are leveraging the approved content that should be going out.
We
So
actually have a
Jillian,
resource spread that
yeah,
specifically focuses on taking that core messaging and then making it appropriate for public sector, particularly federal customers, because some of the words are different, some of the way you talk to those kinds of customers are
yes.
different. So we want to make sure that we have the appropriate wording, approach with our federal customers that are slightly different than what you're going to see in the commercial space.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Julian, you told me that adoption happens when leaders, of course, model the behavior. Talk a little bit more about that. What are you directing your management level people, your sales managers? What are you directing them to do differently that encourages sellers to embrace all these great tools? So, obviously, we're doing a show today. We're bringing on Alex. He's obviously doing a lot of things. The company's investing a lot. You wanted to come on the show to talk about some of these great things.
Hmm.
So how are you directing your leaders to make sure that it happens?
Yeah, my poor team, they probably hate me at this point, but I found Alex's team in my first week at SentinelOne and just started asking them all kinds of questions and using all the tools and probably asking them for things like, oh, we hadn't thought about that, and
Yeah.
really leaning in. That's why Alex and I are both so like excited to be here today. And I started with just kind of getting an evaluation. Where was the team using any of the tools? Honestly did not see that much adoption. So I started to kind of make it non-negotiable. So we said, oh, we've got this meeting coming up and we're going to talk about this topic. I want you to use this tool. So one of the things Alex's team created was a strategic deal coach almost. And it would say, I've got this opportunity. You could actually put in very little about it. It was surprising how much you could get out of the tool. I've got this customer. Here's what I'm trying to talk to them about. fairly minimal requirements to enter, and it would come back with an entire play. And we use command of the message as our sales training, so it was completely aligned with command of the message, and it would give you a way. So we were in the process of adopting AI and adopting command of the message. And this tool really brought it together and made it impossible for the account executive to not comply with both requests. And it made them much more productive, and it got the adoption level up very quickly. And then it went to the second phase where it was like, oh, I'm asking you a question. And if you come back to me with an answer and I can't tell that there was some deep AI work in here, I would go ask the question. I'd say, oh, what you gave me was okay, but look what I was able to get in 30 seconds, And then they're like, oh no, now we need to get serious. She's going to check. So then it was more proactive on their part. And now I think what we've come out with Claude in particular, it's a much stronger tool. And with the investment in Actively, now I'm seeing my reps starting to across the board just embrace it.
So, Jillian, I want to ask you a general sales leadership question. So, we talk about the fact now, again, we're doing today's interview in July of 2026 with Jillian Swenson and Alex Cruz from SentinelOne. More sales professionals have always had to bring value, right? Now, more so than ever. And one of the great things about the AI tool that you've touched on, it can do a lot of research into what your customer's direction is, right? Especially with
Mhm.
public sector, there's never been a problem with knowing where government agencies are going because it's public information. Of course, you had
Right.
to read a lot of things and you had to research. Now, at the flick of a button, you could figure those things out. How are you leading your teams to help them bring or at least show the customer value, right? The customers don't need to be talking to salespeople because they can go on AI as well and type
Yeah.
in what is SentinelOne's direction or what's the tools that you fit in with your competition's direction. So they don't need you to sit for a day and go through a product roadmap. How are you
Right.
instructing your reps? And Alex, if you want to talk about non-public sector or what your thoughts, how are you helping them use AI, not just for the productivity stuff which we touched on, but to bring more value to the customer?
So one of the things that Alex mentioned earlier on was our business value analysis tool. And I have one sales rep that has just been all in on that tool from day one. And we actually kind of hold her up as the model for how that tool works. And it is not just, oh, plug in some numbers on some ROI spreadsheet that a lot of people have historically put in front of customers. It is a very structured analysis that shows, if you move to this platform, here are the various areas where you can bring value back to your business. And to have that business-based discussion, I think, is one of the primary areas. So it's unacceptable to show up not prepared. With AI, there's no reason for that. That was last year's problem. This year's problem is then how do you translate it into business value? And it's particularly challenging in the federal space, where you're not looking at an annual report and going in and saying how I can increase your earnings per share. It's a very different discussion. So being able to not just take that business value analysis from a financial perspective, but then being able to translate that into mission impact is something where I still think the experience and the human touch is highly additive to AI.
That is great. Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. I think everyone right now is selling an AI powered solution. So how do you separate yourself from all the noise? It's literally quantifying what we can actually drive and providing a proof point of how we've done it. Going back to command of the message, it's all about business outcomes. Here's what we've seen. Here is an example of hypothesized value. And then helping your champion actually provide this and sell it internally to the economic buyer. These economic buyers need to see clear line of impact to their business. Same on the enterprise and commercial space. You need to show how we're attaching to business problems and how we can actually influence the business. So AI is tremendous there, and latching on to regulations if they don't adhere to the AI EU Act is huge in Europe, even for US companies that are doing business in Europe. You have to adhere to it, or else you're at risk for 7% of revenues. So quantifying that and making sure that they can build the case internally, paramount to getting these six-figure deals across the finish line.
So we have time for one more question before I ask you for your final thoughts. You guys have implemented a ton of things there had to have been some mistakes, some lessons learned along the way. Especially Jillian, you leading such an important organization. Jillian, why don't you go first? Like, what's a mistake that you learned that in retrospect, you wish you didn't go through? And then Alex, your thought as well.
Um, I edit everything. I actually read it. So fortunately, I didn't get too far down the path with some slop that came out that wasn't usable. But I have seen people present things to me that have obvious errors. So it's a very basic mistake. But I mean, there's a disclaimer at the bottom of everything. This is AI. It can make mistakes. Guess what? That's true. And also not just the glaringly obvious errors, but things that are just not strategically where you want to go. You can't just rely on AI to do your job.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we all hate is when we see something that's obviously AI generated
Yeah.
and it didn't give any thought to me. And I like what you said before, Jillian. You talked about how you had to train it to be humanized to you. And we
Mhm.
constantly know that needs to happen. Alex, what's a mistake that you'd like to focus on?
I'll piggyback on Jillian's comment. Just putting guardrails in place so that we can minimize the amount of inaccuracies. AI is amazing and it does just crazy things on or just reducing time as a rep. But without guardrails in place, it can get you in some hot water if you send something over that's generated and you don't do, trust but verify. We've all came through
Yes.
that frame of thought. So we have to verify AI. We've got to make sure that before we send out anything to a customer, we're reviewing it with a subject matter expert. Is this in fact legit? Are there things here that we don't know? We need to make sure that we're validating before we send out to a customer.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank Alex Cruz and Jillian Swenson with SentinelOne. This has been great. As a matter of fact, we've done over 850 shows. I think this might be the first one I ever did with a in the field VP and a sales enablement leader. So I'm going to be doing more of these. So I love the way that you both worked on each other. I worked, bouncing ideas and getting the key message across. So I want to thank you both with that. As a wrap up, final thoughts. So if you want to talk to something, maybe give some advice, Jillian, to a peer who's maybe 6 months to a year behind you and wants to get going, and Alex, maybe the same thing with enablement leader. One of the great things about you're doing, Alex, and what you're talking about is you're literally helping the field, become more effective. And Jillian's one of her challenges, of course, is making her selling professionals more effective. So I love to see the synergy and the working together. Alex, why don't you go first? Why don't you give us advice, maybe for your peers on what they should be doing, and then Jillian, you'll bring us home.
Sure. I'll say there's nothing more than really spending time with the field to understand what the problems and where the time savings could be. And I think this is where we got it right, was as soon as AI came out and we had, just like we've got to get this jump on board, we very quickly spanned the field globally and said, what are the major use cases that are spending the most time? RFI, RFPs, account research, proposal building. How can we help build out really good, thorough prompts, use cases, and provide those for the field to quickly manage? I think that's one thing, staying close. And then honestly, for me, speaking with Jillian and understanding what she's dealing with and constantly iterating. Because as AI is moving at lightning speed space, those use cases have not changed. So I think the constant iteration, making sure that the field has what they need, for us is the number one thing for us as enablement org, ensuring that we're close to the field.
Very good. Jillian, bring us home.
Well, you stole my answer because my answer was going to be go out and find your Alex. Having that
Yeah,
partnership
it's
between
partnering.
sales leadership and sales enablement is completely
Yeah.
game changer. To steal from your title, that's important. And also, you have to do the work. So your people will only do
Yeah.
what they see you doing. I think one of the reasons I have credibility with my team is I was in sales for a long time, and Alex
Yeah.
carried a bag. I carried a bag. Well, now I'm using the tools. I'm not asking them to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. And I make time for myself every week, even if it's just one small thing to do that I haven't done with AI before. And I'm actually surprised myself. It's like, oh, I wonder if Claude can do this. And I just ask it and I'm like, holy, this is amazing. So just challenging yourself every week to just get a little bit better. That way you don't get so far behind, you're not going to catch up.
I will piggyback also on that. The leaders have to lead from the front. You can't go and say learn AI and you as a leader don't know it yourself. And this is something that Jillian, when she came on, just was passionate about. Show me what we can do with AI, show me the stack, and I'm gonna really get my team to the next level. You have to lead from the front.
Absolutely, and you have to be doing it. All right, once again, I want to thank Jillian Swenson, Alex Cruz with SentinelOne for sharing this great insight today. My name is Fred Diamond. This is the Sales Game Changers podcast.